So, a couple of months ago, we were finally able to lay eyes on the long-awaited sequel to the acclaimed web novel Solo Leveling. For those unfamiliar with this property, this is basically the story of a weak character climbing up to the very top of the food chain due to some mysterious circumstances. Solo Leveling started out as a web novel written by the Korean artist Chung Gong. Of course, it was soon picked up by D&C Media for regular publication, and ever since, it has become known as something of a cult hit. The anime only increased the popularity of this underrated gem, bringing it to a whole new audience. However, we couldn't help but notice that there are some pretty intentional differences in the way Sung Jin-woo's story is told in the anime compared to the original manhwa. Thus, in this marvelous anime, we'll dive right into the world of hunters and dungeons to explore these differences in detail. There's a reason why Solo Leveling has garnered such a legion of fans so quickly. The show feels both familiar and refreshing due to the interesting spin it puts on an almost stereotypical anime setup. To summarize briefly, Solo Leveling is the story of Sung Jin-woo, an E-class hunter who lives in a world where humans with awakened powers have taken up hunting and raiding dungeons as a genuine career option rather than some kind of passionate side quest. Unfortunately, Sung is stuck on the lowest rung of the hunter hierarchy, making it pretty difficult for him to make it big and take care of his mother's recurring medical expenses. But one day, after a particularly nasty mission, Sung gets access to a mysterious program called the System, which allows him to level up upon performing certain pre-decided quests. Like any other anime and manhwa protagonist, Sung then sets out on a journey that leads to numerous encounters with different enemies and monsters. Now that you're all caught up with the basics of Solo Leveling, let's take a look at the differences between the anime adaptation and the original comic. Difference number 1. The pacing. The flow of a story in the medium of anime and manhwa can sometimes be a pretty decisive factor in the way the audience perceives a fictional world. Also, sometimes, creators may have to adjust and rethink certain aspects just to tell a story as efficiently as possible. This also means that when adapting a story from a manhwa to an animated form, certain scenes and characters may have to be changed in order to create more impact. This also holds true for Solo Leveling, as any keen-eyed fan of the comic will be able to quickly detect the small changes incorporated by the animation team while keeping the major plot points intact. The reason this was done was primarily to fix the pacing of the individual episodes in the series. Series producer Soda Furuhashi and director Shunsuke Nakashige have revealed that these changes had to be made in order to use the anime medium to its full potential and to convey how entertaining the original was. The story of the manhwa actually proceeds at a breakneck pace, a brisk read that keeps your eye traveling from one spectacularly drawn image to the next. But for the anime adaptation, the nature of the comic could be a tad too breezy, resulting in pacing that would be all over the place. Furuhashi stated in a recent interview that in order to overcome this hurdle, they had to add a bit of extra meat to the story while keeping an eye out for the overall arc in their adaptation. Most of these additions come in the form of scenes and sequences that weren't present in the original manhwa. Though not completely necessary, these scenes definitely help to fill up the 20-minute runtime and add a bit of flair to many of the confrontations. For example, you might remember when Jin-woo used C-rank boss Kasuka's venom to fight Cerberus in the anime. Well, that dramatic scene was completely missing from the manhwa, but given the spectacular animation in the sequence, we aren't really complaining. Another subtle addition is the early introduction of Go Gun-hee, the leader of the Korean Hunters Association, who doesn't really show up in the manhwa till much later. This allows the writers to use Gun-hee for exposition regarding the hunters, as well as the different systems that govern the world. This is actually a pretty welcome change, as it enables the newer viewers to really grasp the nature of the hunters' work, as well as the very real danger posed by the dungeons. I guess it's undeniable that the animation team actually knows what they're doing, instead of just filling the episodes with filler, as many anime teams often do. Difference number 2, the focus. So, from the very first page of the original manhwa, it's clear enough that this is Jin-woo's story, a narrative that unfolds solely from his perspective. The manhwa makes use of multiple devices like thought bubbles and internal monologues to make sure that the audience is aware of the protagonist's state of mind at all times. Sung Jin-woo is a pretty simple character at first glance. He's fully accepting of his low rank in the hunter world, and actually doesn't even seem that keen on participating in the adventures. His sole motivation seems to be his ailing mother, whose unpaid bills basically force our young hero to become a part of the Hunter Association, which just seems to have the most efficient life insurance policies ever. Throughout the manhwa, Sung is painted as a solitary character, and his game-like occupation furthers his isolation as he mostly goes out to battle in dungeons alone. In the anime, Sung is just a bit more outgoing, and the narrative pays more attention to the world building and the side characters in the show. The anime also omits Jin-woo's internal struggle regarding hunting, as the manhwa leans much more into his internal contemplations regarding regarding the high-risk, low-return nature of the job. This allows more time for the other characters in the show to shine. For instance, when Jin-woo enters the construction site, he first greets the hunter, Kim Sang-shik, and is taken away to greet the other team members. But in the manhwa, this interaction is cut out entirely, and Jin-woo proceeds directly to a confrontation with the healer Lee. The additional interaction is a clear testament to the fact that the series is attempting to establish a greater sense of camaraderie, which is then shattered by the other hunter's cruelty towards the weak Jin-woo. But these additions don't stop here. All throughout the anime, we veer away from diving into Jin-woo's character too deeply. Like in the manhwa, there's a pretty significant chunk that explains Jin-woo's inability to afford a proper weapon due to his poverty, but the anime is forced to simplify this to make space for world-building elements. However, since the anime has just started out, only time will tell whether they're able to portray Jin-woo's character with as much nuance as the manhwa does. Difference 3. Content and details. No matter how much you try to deny it, anime does have a certain advantage over comics. The most prominent is the possibility of movement. Now, a professional artist of Chung-gong's caliber is perfectly capable of creating movement in his images, but animation is definitely the more dynamic medium. Due to this, a lot of fight scenes in the anime are enhanced through the spectacular animated sequences created by the A1 Pictures studio. The sheer flow and rhythm of these encounters will leave you breathless, even though many of the details do not occur in the manhwa. This is another of those changes that add to the original content by building on the foundation laid down by the manhwa. But the changes in the content are not limited to the fight scenes, as there are many examples even in the quieter parts of the show. Just take the beginning of the very first episode of Solo Leveling's anime, where the story starts with a flashback to Korea's Jeju Island and the outbreak of the S-rank gate that floods the island with killer ants. The opening is definitely a very efficient way of familiarizing first-time viewers with the world of Solo Leveling. Not only did it provide us with a comprehensive view of this universe, it also treated longtime fans of the manhwa to glimpses of prominent S-rank hunters way before they actually show up in the storyline. But the anime also does a good job of removing some prominent moments from the manhwa, perhaps in hopes of creating a more streamlined viewing experience for the average viewer. The manhwa pays way more attention to Jin-woo's struggles before the gate burst, allowing us to see his crippling poverty as well as ridicule at the hands of other hunters in much more detail. The most prominent change in the entire story, however, is that the anime is way more Japanese than the Korean manhwa ever was. All the characters have been provided with Japanese names, and some cultural aspects of the island nation have been passed into the story. Fortunately, the international release of the anime has tried its best to uphold the consistency of the dialogue and text despite the linguistic alterations. This caused quite an uproar among fans during the series announcement some 2 years ago, but with the international release on January 6th of this year, much of that controversy has died down. Another interesting aspect of the manhwa that the anime ignores is the news reports that elaborate on the aftermath of various dungeon breaks. But despite all these changes, the anime still manages to stay true to the spirit of the original, and we can't help but be excited to see where this show goes next. Difference number 4. Storytelling and tone. Well, to put it bluntly, the original manga is much grittier than the anime adaptation. Don't get us wrong, the show is still bloody and brutal with numerous exciting fight scenes, but there's something about the sheer terror inspired by Chung-gong's sketches that just can't be replicated in the animated medium. Perhaps it's the excruciating detail the man has put in every panel of this story, or maybe it's the otherworldly nature of his monster designs, but the guy really got cooking for this manhwa. Just look at the pure terror on the faces of Jin-woo's party members when they first encounter the giant rat. This fear and anxiety regarding the unknown is definitely lacking in the animated sequence covering the incident. The anime also removes some of the more depressing aspects of Jin-woo's existence by removing the thought bubbles that give us insight into his mind. Instead, we get to see Jin-woo's growth through the reactions of other hunters to his feats. Though this is an effective narrative device, it lacks the personal intimacy of the manhwa's internal monologues. A simple example of this is how the anime chooses to quickly gloss over the specific methods Jin-woo uses to improve his skills as a hunter. In the manhwa, these are given much more weight and time, allowing the audience to personally identify with all the protagonist's victories and failures. Throughout the anime, there are also a large number of Easter eggs that can only be caught by manhwa readers. Needless to say, these are missing from the original. The show does a great job of providing us with cameos from some of the most beloved characters from the manhwa, the ones that don't show up in the story until much later. Around the middle point of the first episode, viewers are treated to a scene of hunters getting their ranks tested and undergoing the association's initiation training. Now, for first-time viewers unfamiliar with the manhwa, this might just be another scene that provides details regarding the world the hunters inhabit. But for fans of the original webcomic, point, this included two pretty huge Easter eggs in the form of appearances by Yo Jin-ho and Han Song-yi. Both these characters would develop relationships not only with our protagonist, but also with Sung Jin-woo over the course of the series. But what makes it particularly interesting for the fans is the fact that the anime chooses to introduce them as strangers just after their awakening. Solo Leveling's interest in hunters other than Sung is also evident in the way they introduce Cha Hain. Now, even if we ignore the fact that all of us have a massive crush on the S-rank hunter, it's still safe to say that Cha is one of the most powerful characters in the manhwa. The Vice Guildmaster of the Hunter Guild, Korea's strongest hunting group, is definitely a force to be reckoned with in this world. In the manhwa, Cha does not make her entrance until the 65th chapter before quickly developing into the series' leading female character. The anime introduces us to Hain in a dazzling scene featuring a purse snatcher that had us pining for the graceful hunter even more. Now, that's the kind of scene that's effective for both longtime readers and newer fans alike. Marvelous verdict! We think, especially after making this video, that it's pretty evident that the anime is not the same as the manhwa. There are a lot of changes, some subtle, some prominent. But does this change the core of the story? Well, not really. So far, the anime has managed to stay faithful to the themes and ideas embedded in the saga, even managing to surpass the original manhwa in certain areas. The manhwa definitely provides a more personal look at the character of Sung Jin-woo, but we're glad we got to spend some time with the other characters of the Solo Leveling universe through the anime. The animation team's choices definitely paid off, and the show even managed to break into the list of the world's most popular TV series on IMDb. If that's not success, we don't know what is. And with that, we've also reached the end of our video, but do let us know if we've missed out on some differences in the comments down below.